We have been trialling a tree establishment programme, several different sorts of pilots, working with 5 local authorities. We're a partnership project. We've got Sophie here from DEFRA, we've got Nick and we've got Ben from the local authorities who've actually been doing the work on the ground, so you can talk to them and ask them lots of questions about whatever you want to know about the things that I'm going to now tell you. We've only got time to talk about 3 of the pilots today, so I'm just going to crack on. The first one is urban tree establishment. We've been seeing if the Miyawaki method of woodland establishment could be cost effective for local authorities. So to do this, we've planted 16 plots in public settings. Each one has a Miyawaki side and a comparison side, which is just how the comparison side is just how the local authorities did their standard planting, as they would normally do. And we recorded all the costs and counted the survival rates for all the trees. So you can see that the Miyawaki side on the right hand side there has really come on much faster than the comparison side. But it's also very beautiful as well. This was a lovely autumn day not so long ago. This was only 2 or 3 years old. It's already got lots of fruit for the birds. So it's lovely, beautiful, nice for biodiversity. But really we are interested in the stats. These charts show that there was a greater survival rate in the Miyawaki plots, and also that the cost per established tree was lower in the Miyawaki plots. So admittedly it's only the first couple of years, 3 years, but so far it seems like it's a more reliable way to ensure survival of your newly planted trees. That in comparison to the more usual local authority methods, so paying a contractor to plant whips basically. So that was the first pilot. Tree schemes will be Sophie.
So tree schemes where you give trees to people or organisations for them to plant on their own land. It's not a new idea. Lots of people have been doing it. Lots of local authorities do it, and we know that like it can be a really good way to get a lot of trees out to a lot of different people, and also for those trees to be planted across different landscapes. What we wanted to know is what happens to those trees. So once you've given them out to people, do any of them survive? So we ran some of our own schemes through the local authorities we've been working with, and so far we've got a survival rate of 82%, which we thought was pretty good for this kind of scheme. That is just 1 or 2 years after planting, so we do expect that to dip down probably to around 60%, but it's still okay. The interesting thing that we did and we wanted to find out about was the difference between a free tree scheme and a subsidised tree scheme. So is there any difference in survival if we ask people to pay half the cost for their trees? We've done a lot of number crunching. Clever stats guys worked it all out, and I'm going to really simplify it down here and say, if you imagine this man here, he takes his 10 trees away, plants them in his garden, he doesn't pay for them, doesn't look after them very well, and 4 of them survive. We think if you gave this same man the same trees, he planted them in the same garden, but you asked him to pay half the cost, he might look after them a little bit better, and 6 will survive. So that's really interesting, and that tells us that the more people value the trees, the better they'll look after them, and the more of them will survive, which maybe sounds obvious, but we've got some numbers behind it now, which is really cool. And what we also did is we surveyed the people that have been taking these trees and asked them why they wanted the trees, what is it that they value about the trees. And what always comes across is they really care about the wildlife and the biodiversity that they think the trees are going to bring, that the trees are going to benefit. And I think also that's good to have knowledge of if you're trying to bring trees into public life, to know why people want those trees. So tree schemes.
And the third thing we're going to talk about today is the community tree growing. We knew that there were people out there growing trees for their local communities, but we didn't know how many there were or what they grew. And so far we've discovered that there are probably about 80 groups across the UK, and that they grow maybe about 250,000 trees a year, which then get either donated or sold quite cheaply back to the local community. Community tree nurseries can be anywhere really, from people's back gardens to allotments or areas of hard standing. Even on the right, that's a parish council car park, as was, I think, had an irrigation system installed, and now they grow trees and they plant them in the local community. We've produced a lot of resources out of this project to help support the community tree growing sector. So I hope you've heard of the Tree Growers Guide. It's actually a booklet, but it's a whole suite of online resources as well, so you can Google it and find that. How to set up a community tree nursery, there are videos as well, how to grow trees from seed. We'd like to ask whether or not it would be possible to grow your own at any of the sites that perhaps you manage, and how you can support community tree growing in a variety of locations. So that's kind of what we're going to do next. We're going to split into two groups. One group will chat about the urban tree establishment trial, the Miyawaki plots. The other group is going to chat about the free tree schemes, the subsidised tree schemes, and community tree nurseries. So could I just have a little show of hands if who wants to talk about Miyawaki? No? Well, in that case, should we just have one big group talking about whatever we want to talk about then? Okay, great. Well, let's just dive into that then. That's the resources are on this QR code if you need it.
The Miyawaki one earlier, and it was brilliant.
But we've got Ben and Nick here to actually tell you what it was actually like doing these projects and what it actually feels like as a local authority to do this kind of thing, establish trees in slightly new and different ways. So far away, they're the experts, they know how it works. Has anybody got any questions?
Has anyone considered a tree scheme at their local authority?
Yeah, we've got one.
You got one, yeah? How well is that one?
Pretty poorly.
Really?
Yeah. No one wants to volunteer to do it.
Right.
Because it's in the winter, trying to give them away. I'm just going to video this. And then,
No audio on that, sir.
thank you for that.
Just your smiling face.
And everyone's really busy. So no one really wants to stand in a drafty town centre on a winter's day, giving them away to people who've got their hands full shopping.
Yeah.
So how did you make it work Nick, you've been doing it.
Structure, we have a paid member,
Well,
myself,
yeah.
who leads on it, and then I have support staff, administrators, finance, and comms to help get. And then the nursery we dealt with actually. We had 2 collection points, but the nursery handled all the collection. We didn't have to turn up there at all, so we got a very good deal with the local tree nursery.
But there was an application process,
There
right?
was an application process, yeah, and we knew who was coming when and how many trees they wanted, so we could allocate the trees to them.
No,
But there is a capacity issue. I mean, I'm funded through the Trees Outside Woods project, but if I wasn't there, it always happened at Shropshire since about 2011, but it kind of fell on someone picking it up as part of it, and in addition to their normal job, which isn't ideal, is it?
No.
I mean, we've done, as we call them, tree giveaways for 2 or 3 years now. I'm from Nottingham. We still have a plant nursery, so it was coordinated via the plant nursery. So we brought the whips in as part of bigger tree planting schemes that we were going on with, and we were giving away in the region of anywhere up to sort of 1,200–1,500 trees a year, or whips a year.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it was a lot of social media marketing in the first place. They were done over 2 or 3 weekends a year. wasn't too bad because we've got staff working in the nurseries
Yeah.
anyway, so you've got that staff resource there. It was basically gazebo, trees. We knew roughly when people, well, we'd advertise the time slots when people could come to pick them up, and they came, picked them up, and then just happened to wander around the plant shop buying merchandise at the same time. You know, win-win from that point of view. So they actually it worked really well from that point of view. But yeah, I can fully understand standing in the middle of a shopping precinct trying to give out 3 trees isn't necessarily the best way of engaging with people.
I mean, you could have parks as collection points as well, which is another point. It's somewhere that people are going to go who are interested in nature, yes.
There's a question, I guess, for all 3 of you. When folks are taking trees, how many do they typically take on?
Well, we have a system where we give a packs of 20 trees away. They can either be, depending on, there's quite wide geography in Shropshire, so it's quite upland. So we have upland packs, lowland packs, wetland packs, and hedge packs, which seem very popular. A lot of farmers gapping up hedges and that sort of thing. And we have a mixed pack of 20 trees, depending on which pack they are, and they can have a minimum of 1 pack. Other local authorities have done single trees, haven't they?
Yeah, so we did, so Chichester, they did it for coastal environments, and they liaised with their ecologists to make sure that the species that they're getting in those packs were appropriate for a site, particularly if it's just general distribution. And we did a slightly different model in Cornwall where we actually liaised with the parishes. So essentially we did a free scheme through the parishes, they liaised with their parishioners, people, and so we then said to the parishes, you come and collect your trees and you distribute them out to your parish network. So that was a really great way of actually reducing some of the effort on that, and all it was from our point of view was that sort of coordination, and then again the parishes would go to the nursery, and that's where we also then worked in one case with our community tree nurseries as well, and they helped to provide the trees for that, and so it was a nice bit of
So they go direct, they go to the nursery. Or just to ring them, or does the nursery?
So we'd liaise. So we sort of tried to say restrict what the offer was. You know, if it was going to, when we were talking with the parishes, it was like, how many trees do you need? Okay, we'll book those out with the community tree nursery or the commercial nursery, and that they'd arrange a date. You go and collect them on that date, and then they'd give them out to whoever they needed.
So urban tree planting, you know, don't want neighbourhood disputes over you've got a huge oak tree in your back garden. So did you select kind of smaller trees?
Yeah, they were. It's tied in with all the work we were doing. So you know, cherries, rowan, smaller trees that aren't going to cause that impact on neighbours. Well, they would do in 30, 40 years, but certainly not in the short term. Yes.
And did you give them, you know, tree management guide or information on how to look after the tree, how to plant it?
Basic information, yes,
Yeah.
or at least, you know, QR codes with information that people can scan, take away. So
On our website we have the tree planting and aftercare guide. Yeah.
Do you know how many of the trees you've given away are alive still?
I have absolutely no idea what's
That's
going on.
interesting.
So
Because we did quite a lot of surveys, because DEFRA were very interested in survival rates, because we want to show it's value for money, not just the amount of trees given out for the money, but value, trees that survive for the money. We got about 80% survival rate in Shropshire, but it could change with different subsequent years and also with weather, because the trees that were planted in 2022 probably did a lot worse than this year. This year's been a very good year.
And would it be helpful to hear a little bit about how you actually found that out?
Yes, certainly. So we collect email addresses and postcodes when someone makes an order, and we follow that up with a survey, Survey Monkey or something similar, just to ask about when you planted, have you watered, have you mulched, how many survived, and what do you think is the benefit of these trees to you in terms of wildlife and other things. And then we follow that up with visiting 10% of the people who reply on site, which does take a bit of time, but it helps build a bit of a community relationship as well with the people out there. So it's never wasted time.
I think you already answered the question I was going to ask, but in terms of location tracking, it's done on postcode?
Well, we actually have a drop a pin on a map on our application form. The IT people do all that. I just see that out, yeah. And then so we know exactly where they are, and we do check on whether it's on a unsuitable site. So if it's a special scientific interest in the middle of a housing estate or a nature reserve. So we do a few basic checks. And that's a lot of where your support admin work comes in, is doing the applications and that. Yeah.
Do you get folks who kind of, for want of a better term, cut and run? So they'll take your trees and then you never hear from them again?
Oh yeah.
Or you find out that the trees, you go back and they rather sheepishly say they've gone somewhere else.
Right.
Well, you want to talk about almost like tree establishment numbers, don't you? We're trying to talk around that now, because numbers of trees planted, great, but if only one of them survives, then that's an irrelevant number.
No, there was stuff in the press, wasn't there, about local authorities wasting money on tree schemes, but we've actually shown now we're not wasting the money, are we? They are surviving if they're planted properly, and also, as Jackie said, Sophie said, interestingly, the 50% ones they actually paid for, they took more care of and they had a better survival rate. So it's interesting.
Getting people to get skin in the game almost, isn't it? So.
Go for it.
Miyawakis.
Yeah.
You know, thinking about, because I remember back to when there was the National Urban Forestry Unit and the Black Country Urban Forestry Unit. And I've not been able to find the source of it, but I remember at the time, well, when that came to an end, they did some work and they actually found that in the time period that they've been operating planting trees, that natural colonisation, scrubbing up, had effectively produced more tree cover than the planting schemes. And I just wondered whether
I think
interesting.
I think natural regen is very interesting in a forestry concept or a woodlands concept, where you've got your clear fell and there's a standing forest next to the cleared area. You're going to get good natural regen there. This is more trees outside woodlands where we've found it less effective.
Well, actually, the urban tree establishment pilot covered Miyawaki planting, and it did a couple of other things, a couple of scoping studies, and it did do a natural regen trial as well, which so far, I mean, again, it's only been 3 or 4 years, has just yielded absolutely nothing. That was in Kent, which is very urban.
And there were things that we recognised we could have done better to try and help, but I think we were going for a very minimal intervention approach, you know, cost to see.
But yeah, I mean, it could work. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just being, if you're going down that approach, you've got to be comfortable. It just takes time.
yes, yeah. I think
actually there's a lot of merit in that transitional process you know, through the succession that goes on. And
it probably happened on sites that people weren't looking at, and it wasn't
until it was there.
That's right. I was thinking with because the other thing that they did, which I think is a technique that's still used, is just planting very limited a range of species, so those early successions, so your birches, your alders, in that, and just relying on birds to bring in the other species. I don't know whether that's.
I've done that, well, again, more woodland side of things. It just depends on what your objectives are for the site, really. So, if you're just looking to essentially establish some sort of canopy cover, then do that, and then it will just change over time. Isn't it? All there's options to beat up and manipulate the canopy later on. But
we have mixed some more standard trees in there, that are not just the pioneers, haven't we?
Oh no, but in the Miyawaki trials, we had that. Essentially, what would be looking at an NBC community that's locally appropriate for that area, and then using that to inform the species that were planted, and that was everything from the tree canopy down to the field layer. And what was the sites that we were mainly choosing were sites sort of fairly bereft of anything. You know, there are the heavily modified soils, former building sites, really intensive use, amenity land. So actually, there wasn't really much going on there. So actually, it's been a chance to essentially bring in some of that stuff which wouldn't necessarily, it doesn't have a hedgerow nearby, so that's a natural colonisation from that hedgerow or some source. There might not be the opportunity for that really. So it's been quite an engaging and a good way to accelerate that sort of process in some ways. as with any planting. But yeah, the key thing with Miyawaki is that it's that growth performance that we've seen in that early stage, that establishment period, and also survival rates.
And they clearly are just experiments at this point, really. I mean, they've seemed to be growing extremely well compared to our comparison plots so far. I mean, we'll keep monitoring them as long as we can and see.
What's the end goal for it? Is it with succession? Will you've got larger trees in there? Will you ultimately just end up with two?
Well, it's probably worth me explaining a little bit about the kind of core Miyawaki concept, which is that you do a lot of kind of research before you plant anything, and you identify the potential natural vegetation, as Ben was just sort of describing, of a site, and then the kind of final set of woodland that you want to restore. You identify what those species are, and then you plant the climax species. In theory, in the Japanese version, that is it. You densely plant the climax species, and that effectively is your final woodland. So that's kind of the core original concept as it was. And you plant them quite densely, and they chase each other up to get fast, to grow tall. And obviously that it came from Japan, which is a different climate and different setting than the UK. So in that sense, ours can only be experiments at this point. But we've tried to do it as close to the kind of principles of the Miyawaki method as possible. So the kind of, as Ben described, the identifying the species that you think should be there in a kind of restored woodland as it was.
And the really dense planting, so in the Miyawaki you're doing like 3 to the square metre. So you're encouraging that natural competition, and then doing a lot of soil amendments where essentially you're trying to improve organic matter, or increase organic matter and enhance microbial activity in the soil, so that you're then encouraging that sort of accelerated growth.
And the intention is that you, in the kind of pure Miyawaki method, is that you do quite a lot of intensive prep. You plant the trees, you look after them a bit for the first 3 years, and then it's essentially maintenance free after that point. You don't even water it, you don't weed it, you don't thin it, you don't do anything.
It self-thins, it starts to settle out, and gradually things that die form back into the soil, and it just...
So there is a failure rate built into that?
Yeah.
Sort of part of the process, yeah. And it's sort of, it's interesting because you look at that small plot and you think, well, in terms of mature trees, you can't actually fit a lot in there, and yet we've planted hundreds of trees. But in the meantime, whilst it's growing up to be, the height, the pictures there, the height of the trees behind the Miyawaki plot, you've got this thicket of stuff that's like really quickly become a habitat, and is flowering really early, is producing fruit really early. So it's something really interesting in the meantime as well. So yeah, we don't really know what's going to happen. Maybe it will just be 3 trees in the future. But
so yeah, just for reference, this is the control plot on here. So they're all planted at the same time, and then this is
all treated the same.
Watered at the same rates. But it's just that this has had the soil amendments and the density planting going on, and this hasn't.
Same species proportions and everything. Yeah.
So it's just quite stark contrast, and that's what makes this sort of study interesting, is that we do have a control against the planting.
And that's also really helpful in terms of, I know we were talking about earlier at lunch how it lets people in, but it also keeps people out. Like, it's a lot of our comparison plots, you're finding like vandalism is a big issue in urban areas, and when you've got something that quite immediately becomes a thicket, it's really hard to get into. It just hasn't been such a problem, and the trees are also establishing a lot faster, so difficult to go in and snap them off.
Is that not a concept for tree nursery growing then? So you've grown them really, in a compact way quicker, rather than having lots of small saplings in a tree nursery that takes a long time. Could you? I know you might damage the roots, but could you lift them from there because you've grown them a lot quicker to then replant them elsewhere? Could it be a...
I think, yeah, because probably the nature of the root spread. I mean, there are certainly some nurseries that, I mean, when you do field grow and stuff anyway, it's very high density, you have bare rootstock. But there are some people doing containerised stuff using Miyawaki principles in terms of really good soil, essentially feeding and fertilising their trees really well, so you get really good established root networks but you're going to be naturally paying more for that tree, definitely. But I think for that, because of the way the trees would be going out, you certainly have to be doing some undercutting, but also actually trying to get in there, because the trees are established so well. The stem taper on them is phenomenal on the ones in there, and they're really thick. So when we started the trial, we did some baseline survey data on soil stuff, and we're hoping to maybe do some above ground surveying, looking at the basal area and things like that.
Do you think the scope for using these as sort of nucleus plots for woodland expansion? Because was that work that I think it was Forest Research did, where looking at natural colonisation, and it works if you've got a source,
something
a seed
nearby,
source, and I think what's it, 100 metres or something away, and it drops right down. And so you could imagine, if you're thinking about local nature recovery strategies and connections and things, having sort of Miyawaki plots as stepping
The
stones.
seed sources
And
yes, I mean, I could imagine that would potentially work. Depends how long the trees take to reach sexual maturity and all that kind of stuff. But it sounds like a good idea to me.
Yeah. And one of our phase 2 pilots is that we're actually looking at how you can apply some of the methodology of the Miyawaki approach to establishing hedgerows.
yeah.
So things like that. So actually, could you get an accelerated establishment of a hedgerow, which would then feed beautifully into your natural colonisation sort of in the wider landscape, but it's much more restricted and maybe practical application for some circumstances. So, and that's sort of that's in our phase 2 pilots at the moment. So.
Is there an opportunity cost if you're using more trees to achieve a similar result in terms of the amount of tree cover or the amount of hedge run that you're getting, and you're using a community nursery, say, where it's you've got people working sort of fairly hard to produce these trees? Is it sort of, I guess if you've got excess trees, it's not an issue. But if people are in competition for a finite pool of available stock, does that sort of?
So through our programme, yes, we use community tree nurseries, but there's also a lot of commercial tree nurseries out there. And so, yes, we can sort of blend and make up the shortfall somewhat. And to be honest, there's been a lot of talk about running out of trees, but there hasn't. We haven't yet run out of trees. You talk to most nurseries, they're still burning millions of trees a year. So it's and we're still importing a lot. So I think there is still that stock availability there. But I suppose it's like everything, isn't it? When we do these things, it's about, if you can plan it, you have those conversations early with the nursery, you can start to pump prime and they can start to plan for such a project, particularly if you've got a bit of a pipeline of stuff coming along. And if you develop one year, you could be having a bit of a pipeline going forward. So,
we've also got a PhD student who's started is looking at a life cycle assessment of this and other kinds of tree establishments. So the kind of whole life cost of growing stuff that you plant and that you grow in a nursery and you move, and there's a lot of energy involved in that, and then you move it and then you plant it and maybe it dies and then you do it again. So we've got a PhD student looking at that full life cycle analysis as well. But she's just started, so it'll be a couple of years until that result comes out.
I mean, I have a lot of respect for the Japanese and their connection with nature and so on. It always feels like it's battery farming for trees. I want to kind of like release the poor caged trees. Like the sake. I mean, they're obviously growing, but are they? Has anyone asked the trees really how they feel? They're like compacted
do they feel squashed?
and like they can't do what they're naturally meant to do, can they? And I mean, conifers are planted in rows, and because we want them growing quickly and we want to harvest them and chop them down. And part of me, I look at that, I go, they're just fighting for space, and what's it for though? Is it for the trees?
I think that's a key point. Is this is not an ideal method for all scenarios, right? It's like if you've got a specific objective, like if you need those trees to go quickly because you've got a site that's got really heavy vandalism pressure, or you want them really quickly for a specific objective, it can be really helpful. But there are other ways of establishing trees that are really great. You don't need to do this. I think. So.
I suppose the other side, but like before ash dieback, you know, when you know, if I was going out monitoring a woodland and measuring natural regeneration, having a whole thicket of seedling ash come through would be a good sign. But, and you know, only one of those is going to. So it's you might think you think well, all those are going to waste, but
there's a sort of a Darwinian thing, isn't it? So ultimately, it's the ones that will survive and grow the best in that environment, which will be suited to place that will take place of that canopy, sort of your final canopy.
We've got a few pictures around. Just feel free to dive in and have a look of some of the plots and how they looked when they were first prepared. And there is somewhere, I can't see it just now, a kind of an example. Oh, you've got it near you, that black and white picture there. An example of some of the kind of press that you can get when you put the word Miyawaki in front of it, in front of any sort of tree planting. It tends to, I don't know.
It's a relatively new approach. I think the first one was only planted in 2019.
In the UK, yeah.
So it was. So that's what we're also looking to test: is are costs justified? What do you get? Is it just a snake oil salesman's pitch, or is there actually something in there? And actually, this is what we're starting to find out now: is that there is something in there really, which is really nice to just sort of eke out. And we've got this phase 2 where we're trying to look at the different features, or trying to drill down on some of the questions which that have been raised during phase 1 trials. Do you have to disturb the soil as much? Can you just get away doing particular aspects to make it slightly cheaper, to make it less intrusive? Because the sites where we try to establish these are on heavily modified soils, so former building sites, former builders' yards, compacted parkways, stuff like that. So.
It is very much urban though, isn't it, at the moment?
It is.
It's not like a forest planting over the countryside yet.
Yeah, wouldn't be envisaging this for open fields, where it hasn't had that history. So it's very, very much appropriate for site.
Yeah. Well, whereas I'm thinking of it in that zone because there's agri-environment schemes for field corner, allowing that to scrub up, and you could see some rather just let it.
So that's what's interesting about our phase 2 pilots are looking to drill down on: can you just get away with just doing higher densities, or maybe more topical applications? So, for example, in that black and white photographs, we've got different plots. One has got the full Miyawaki, where you dig down, you do all the aeration, everything. The other one's just using an auger. You just pilot little holes and you add the bits of soil. Other one's just topical dressings, using a rotavator, something like that. Just to gently aerate the soil. So can you do that? And that might actually encourage more natural regen, because you're essentially doing a lot of scarification or something like that. So seeing what comes of that. So that's where we're sort of having a look.
Do you want to say something about the cost as well?
Yeah, so when the first ones came in through Earthwatch, there was quite an expensive cost. It was £30,000, and so it's like, okay, part of what we were looking at is what's that money going on? So we then were looking at the different sites. So my sites in Cornwall, I did 3 of them. They're each 600 metres square, or 2 of them are 600 metres squared each. So it's about 2.5 times a tennis court, and I did the 2 sites and a smaller one for about £10,000. So, and that was with trying to do all the experimental infrastructure along with it, but we also then created 2 sites for the schools as well. So in the long term, they were quite interested in having like an outdoor learning environment, or outdoor place where the kids could just go and just be outside, and so a bit of seating areas. That was including the infrastructure as well. But yeah, that was the product. So that immediately we increased the area and did it for a third of the cost than what other people were doing it for. So there was a way to sort of implement it and project manage it directly. So some of the costs which might be presented to yourselves through other bodies might be quite high, but you can get it reduced down. So
We're charging 30,000 per plot per one.
There was maintenance and monitoring involved in
Yeah.
that, but
Yeah, they have a
they have a
package in
and feed into
operation.
a network of it. But it was just actually okay. That's quite a big cost.
Mm.
So what's that going on? That's what we wanted to try and understand as to where it's coming. So
But it is intense and it is expensive.
It is,
so I
yeah.
think the field corner thing is like, well, you could do it. It would really kickstart it, but it's also a very expensive way of doing it. So
Sorry about this, but what was the price for the Miyawaki versus the, I think you said 30 for the...
I don't have that graph. Is it? Well, so we've got cost per.
There you go. Look, cost per planted tree in the Miyawaki
Yeah, about £10. Yeah.
is about £10.
Yeah. Oh, very
Cost
good.
per planted tree in the control is more than that because we're planting fewer trees. And
Yeah.
this is when it's a bit tricky because our experiment is like one unit thing and we're done two sides, and so the costs are kind of one set of costs divided by two. If you were not doing anything to do with Miyawaki and you were just planting normally, it would be less than the cost of a Miyawaki, if you see what I mean. This report, by the way, you can download. It's on the QR code and it's got all the details in it. But the cost per survived tree after the 3 years is £10 per Miyawaki, and it's £50 for the control tree. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
because you've got fewer and fewer
Because
trees
you've
over
got
that
fewer,
time
yeah.
period,
Yeah.
so your initial investment is spread over fewer and fewer trees over that time. So.
But it's more interesting to me. This one's more interesting to me. The kind of reliability of it. It's you get what you pay for in a Miyawaki kind of thing, and they survive and they're there after 3 years, admittedly. Yeah.
Come back in
So,
20
yeah.
Yeah, but in terms of an exercise, we found it's been a very useful way to engage people in the process of tree planting. It has quite an instantaneous effect, particularly in some of these sites, because it does have quite a rapid turnaround, so people can actually see change. And it gives you an opportunity, it potentially might give you an opportunity to then manipulate the environment a little bit more with more mature trees. So.
Is time up, Sam? Thank you.